In this video, we will talk about creating, modifying, and removing a policy from CloudSoda, as well as generating a one-time quick transfer. To begin, navigate to your CloudSoda UI and click on the Policies tab in the left-hand side. From here, you'll be able to see any policies that have already been created. If you hover over them, you'll be able to see if they are enabled or disabled, the source and the destination folders, as well as if they are a copy, a move, or a sync based off of the icon that is presented. If you need to create a new policy, click on the Create Policy button, which will then take you to the Create Policy UI. From here, you can see several things. One, you can note the different transfer types, your different sources, and your different target destinations. To configure a policy, you need to select a source. In this case, I will pick my SMB share. I can select any subdirectories that I would like. In this example, I will go ahead and say my day one folder. And then I can choose the transfer type. I can then decide if I want to do a copy, a move, or a sync to my point B location. It is important to note that even though you see multiple buckets configured with different tiers set on them, you can manually overwrite the tier. For example, this is set to go to S3IA, and I have the option to manually modify the storage class that I'm writing to something like deep archive, flexible retrieval, instant access, whatever it is that you have in your environment. You can do this for any of the major cloud providers, including AWS, Azure, and GCP. In this case, though, I will go ahead and choose Wasabi. All of the data that I am moving is going to be kept in native format, so my file and folder structures will be kept intact on both the source and destination. It is important to note that a copy is just what it sounds like. It makes an exact copy of the data on point A on point B. A move is a copy, a verification of the hash, and then a deletion from the source. And a sync is a one-way sync from point A to point B, propagating deletes. This also means that any files that exist on the target that do not exist on the source will be deleted. If you sync from an empty directory to any kind of target, it will completely wipe that target system. Once you have your selection made, your source and your target set up, you can then move on to the Rules tab. This is where you specify what data you want to move. By default, it will take all data in the source directory, but if I need to filter it out, I can either add a rule that specifies specific types of data, such as file name contains .txt, or based off of a modified date, so let's say modified before June 2nd, 2025, or even a relative time. So in this case, if I'm looking for any data that is older than 70 days since last access, I then just have to hit the check button. This will then show that this rule is applied. To disable this rule, I can simply click the checkbox or recheck it to bring it back in. I can also mix and match as many rules as I'd like. So simply add in a new rule based off of a new criteria. Or I can even change how the rules are applied. So include if any, include if all, exclude if all, exclude if any, and that will help me filter out my data before it is actually moved over. You can also add in an ignore list. This is based off of git ignore, and so you can remove common files like thumbs.db files, trashes DS store files as an example. In this case, I am going to remove both of these rules from my policy and move over to my conflicts tab. This is a very important tab to note because it defines how you treat a file if it exists on both the source and the target side. As an example, if I had a file called smb.txt on my source and my target, how does that file get treated when a copy, move, or sync operation is performed? By default, the conflict handling is set to overwrite, meaning that every time this policy runs, it's going to overwrite that file on the target side. Very often, this is not ideal. That's why we give you the option to change the conflict handling from overwrite to rename or skip, depending on the type of operation being handled. You can also add a condition to the conflict handling. Many times it is advantageous to add a condition such as the source size is not equal to the target size. This would mean that if my source has been modified and the size has increased or decreased, that file has been changed. Therefore, the newest version of that file will get copied over to my target side. You can change this to be based off of the modified time and have your conditions be set to not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than, or greater than and equal to. Just like rules, you do have the ability to add multiple different conditions to one single policy. On the next tab, you can define when a job will fail. A job will fail after it has either hit a certain error limit, meaning that X amount of files have not been able to be transferred, or if their hashes do not match, or based off of the error percentage or the total runtime of the policy. I recommend that you change the transfer error type to transfer error percentage and set it at a high enough criteria so that way your initial run completes and then you can come back and reevaluate any errors if there are any. Again, you are able to mix and match and add new conditions if you would like. From here, I'm going to move on to the Settings tab. In this tab, CloudSoda allows you to specify a user and group to associate with a transfer. In the event that there are any kind of egress fees, then this will be tracked in the Reporting tab. You can also add in key value pairs, such as group equals marketing, or something along the lines of purpose equals archive. That key value pair will then be saved as part of the metadata that is written to an object store. You can also change the recommended validation. By default, we utilize the hash when file to file and the e-tag when pushing to an object-based store. You can also change it to content-based or by size. There is also the ability to change it to no validation, which is not recommended when you go from file to file. It is also important to note that if you are going from a file-based storage to another file-based storage, you may want to utilize Windows security descriptors. In this case, you will need a Windows-based agent using a local-based accessor. To find out more about those, please refer to the previous videos in this series or go to support.cloudsoda.io. You have the ability to select which extended attributes, such as the owner, group, DACL, and SACL, security auditing information, that gets transferred over. Moving over, you have the Schedule tab, which has the ability to tell the policy how often it is supposed to run. This can be set on a calendar expression, either at a specific time and frequency, daily, hourly, or weekly, or based off of a cron expression. To add a cron expression, you can simply use our GUI to create a cron, for example, every hour at 16 and 39, which will then make a custom cron expression, or you can simply put in your own cron expression. This is important because it allows you to control how often a policy gets run for various use cases, such as cloud bursting, archival, or even migrations. Finally, the Preview tab shows you exactly what it would look like to move data from point A to point B. Since I know I'm looking at such a small subdirectory with only 4 gigabytes, I'm going to change my source to my NFS share. And I'm going to go ahead and just look at my show one directory. I'm then going to say I want to make a copy of the data in AWS. And since this is an example, let's say I'm making an archive policy where I want to move any data that hasn't been touched in the last 730 days. Go ahead and turn that on, and then I can preview what this looks like. Even though it's scanning a very large directory, it should show me that only 300 gigabytes of data is going to be moved. 366 files, and it'll take 41 minutes based off of the network pipe I have configured. It also shows me the source and target monthly costs, as well as the trend. Now that I have my archival policy configured, I can simply hit the Deploy button, give my policy a name, and hit the Deploy button. It is worth noting that this policy, even though I have deployed it, is not active. In order to activate it, I have to click into the policy, hit the ellipses, and hit the Activate button. I also do have the ability to clone the job, run it again, or edit it at this point in time. I can also delete it or rename it if needed. For those of you who are thinking, wow, it's very silly to be pushing data to S3 standard IA for an archival policy, you do have the ability to write to any storage class when you're configuring your target storage. I can write to any tier of AWS, Azure, or GCP. I can also define what the default tier is when I'm creating my storage. Please see the previous video for that information. Now that I'm back on my policies page, I'm able to see the next time that this job is supposed to run. If I need it to run sooner, I can simply click the Run Now button, which will then automatically kick off a job to move this data. From here, I of course have the ability to go in to the policy, see how much data has been transferred, active number of files, duration, and cost. I can also go in, cancel, pause, clone, or overwrite the job. In this case, I'll go ahead and cancel it. The other way to have a job move data is from the Jobs tab, where you can click the Quick Transfers button. This GUI should look exactly the same, with the exception of not having a Schedule tab. Configure a job the same way that you would configure a policy. The last thing to note, though, is in the Jobs tab, you will notice that there is a Dry Run button at the top. This allows you to save previews for future reference. As an example, if I wanted to see a preview for moving my entire NFS share to AWS Deep Archive, and I didn't want to wait for this preview to finish, I can simply hit the Dry Run button and give it a name. And then hit the Deploy button, and you'll see that what would happen, Deep Archive Dry Run, is saved in the Dry Run tab at the top right corner. To see my active transfers, I can of course switch back. This is all viewable from the Jobs tab. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at support.cloudsoda.io or visit us at cloudsoda.io.